Welcome to the Health Revolution, a show for people who want straight answers about their health, their body, and their life. Here we cut through trends, through myths, and recycled advice to break down what actually works and why. We explore physical strength, resilience, and mindset through real science, real experience, and real conversations. You'll hear from guests who faced challenge, adapted, and moved forward with intention. No hype, no shortcuts, just clarity you can use. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, health and fitness expert, speaker, and a mom who understands real life. This is the Health Revolution. We begin now. You are watching the Health Revolution, and we're excited that you are joining us today. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, and no matter which way you're tuning into us, please do not forget to hit the subscribe button. We want to stay connected to you. We want to say a big shout out to all our new viewers and listeners. We're excited for you to join us today. Our show is all about how to optimize healthy living, the physical strength of the human body, how to take care of ourselves, the emotional resilience when we have trials and tribulations, and the mental mastery, the fortitude to overcome challenges so that we can put each step forward and live that best life that we choose to have. And one of those topics is something that is near and dear to so very many people's hearts, and that is the courage to speak up, especially when we are dealing with a serious trial and tribulation, an obstacle, a set of events that we've not encountered before. Have you ever had a moment in time where it just changes everything in life? I know I have. And for some, it's huge. It's a monumental shift, more than anybody can ever anticipate. And today we're going to dive into a sensitive topic. We're going to talk about what it means to overcome a situation that really, truly challenges us in ways that we could potentially never thought possible. Our guest today is someone I'm excited to speak to, because she is speaking from the heart and talking about her journey, and her journey is to inspire others to come from the trenches of a moment that has shifted your life and to really triumph and take it to new levels. We'll talk more about that. First, watch this. Let's get to know her. Meet Angie McQuillin, a woman who refused to let her past define her future. After experiencing a violent assault as a teenager, she made the brave decision more than 20 years later to seek justice, beginning a battle that would test her strength, her resilience, and determination. Now, Angie shares the lessons she learned about manipulation, intimidation, and finding the courage to speak up when it matters most. We will learn how to reclaim your voice, stand in your power, and move forward even after life's toughest challenges. Angie McQuillin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And before we talk about the work that you're doing today, which is monumental, I'd like to first find out about the woman that you were before everything changed.
It's been a slow process. I don't think it was like a light switch, but historically, I was an executive coach working very much in the corporate space. Been in the corporate space about 25 years, and I've been an executive coach before recently for the last 10 or so. Definitely a bit more extrovert previously, a bit more of an adrenaline junkie, and my life has changed no end since this recent experience.
And can you take us back to looking back at your life and the moment where everything happened, that what you experienced as a teenager? Can you walk us through, can you set the scene of what happened?
Sure. So at age 10 is kind of where it started rather than the teenage side. So I used to be quite an athlete and still am to a degree, but I was in a swimming club and basically was groomed by one of my swimming coaches when I was 10 years old. This progressed all the way through into my teens. By the age of 14, after spending lots and lots of time with him secretly behind my parents' back, we started a sexual relationship when I was 14. He ended up violently raping me when I was 16. And then from there onwards to where I am now, it's been one hell of a journey to bring me to where I am now, but it took a few years to actually go to the police.
Now, I can only imagine the trauma that you had, that you were navigating through, and just the amount of time it took to grow and just be able to continue moving forward. Can you talk about the process that it was for you to learn and reflect on knowing that this was not your fault, number one, and then number two, that what you needed to do to keep moving forward, even at a young age?
Sure. Well, something that's kind of connected to what you just said, but it's not strictly a direct answer straight away, but I think it's worth noting is anybody that has been violated by somebody who is very popular in a position of authority, in my case, it was my swim coach, or anybody that has a high status in the community, it makes it a lot harder to go through. So that trauma is compounded over and above the actual assault itself because there's this fear of speaking out because you don't believe that anybody's going to believe you because everybody else knows this person, trusts this person, admires this person, etc., etc. So one of the reasons why so few people speak out after such an assault is because of that, because of the fear of basically throwing a hand grenade into a community and splitting that community with half believing you, half not. That's how it feels anyway. So in terms of realizing that it wasn't my fault, I buried this completely from the world for a number of years until I was around about 20. And it was my sister who was the first person that I spoke to properly. And I didn't even really know how to describe it. I just had to when I say describe it, I didn't use the word rape because in that very young age, I honestly thought it was not possible to be violated by your partner because he was my boyfriend as far as I was concerned at that age. So I thought there's no way I can go and tell anybody because I can't use the word rape because as a boyfriend, he can't be done for rape. So I just suppressed it, didn't tell anybody, and told my sister, just described this event that happened. And she was the one that basically said, categorically, it doesn't matter who's your partner, that's definitely rape. And, you know, the physical effects and the mental effects, the emotional effects were evident. I just didn't think I could name it as that one particular thing. And it was just naivety from my part. I was so young. And then I went through over 20 years of self-development until I literally could not contain it anymore. It wasn't like a one day I just woke up. It was a gradual build up where it was like somebody came along and put that pin into that balloon and I just couldn't contain it. I had to do something. I had to speak out. And that was when I went to the police.
I can only imagine that in suppressing and not telling anybody, I can only imagine the turmoil that you felt inside. Can you talk about the struggle within of trying to maintain just the outward appearance that perhaps everything is fine, but inside, obviously, it's clear that it's not?
It's a very good question. I think one of the key things really is the level of rage that you feel, in all honesty. And I know people don't like using that word because it's such a strong word, but I haven't met anybody that has gone through something like I have that doesn't have that kind of impact. And you're absolutely right. It feels like a double life for a long time because you're carrying this thing in secret. And that thing in secret becomes bigger and bigger, like a big mound of shame almost. And the more you try and suppress it, the more you try and hide it from the world, the more you associate that part of you as shameful, and the harder it becomes to speak out about it. But meanwhile, like anybody else, you're trying to, generate a career for yourself, and you're trying to get on the property ladder, and you're trying to have a social life, and you're trying to lead a normal life when it's anything other than normal that you're dealing with on the underneath. So, yeah, I think the trauma itself is a difficult pill to swallow. But like you said, the coupled with the double life and the secrecy behind it, I think compounds that trauma because it becomes very isolating to carry that in such silence.
Were there ways in which you coped with the struggle internally? Were there outward signs that maybe it wasn't as noticeable, but looking back, that was as a result of you struggling internally? Were there things that you did that were either helping you cope, whether healthy or unhealthy? Were there things that were that outlet for you to help you cope?
Yeah, I think I kind of led a life in terms of very healthy or not very healthy when I was younger, in particular in my 20s. So a lot of that feeling that I was having was mostly released through sport. So I always played contact sports, and I found that quite therapeutic. But in terms of, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't deal with some escapism as well at that age. I don't touch it now, but in that era, it was my way of drinking too much, partying too much, all the stuff that isn't good for you. And then I started getting my head around that kind of lifestyle through my 20s, leading into my 30s, going, I've got to sort this, by which time I'd already had years and years of therapy, and I got into coaching, and then my life flipped around, and it was the one part that I learned to start speaking out about generally, like just say no to people more easily, or speaking up in meetings more, or doing things that I historically wouldn't have done. And then it just became the only thing in my life that I hadn't spoken about. So I was now becoming very communicative in lots of different areas and different things in my life, but this one part was still eroding me from the inside because it was such a dark, dirty secret that I was carrying around that nobody knew about. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but yeah, I think the double life and the dealing with the trauma on top of it was definitely a very difficult period.
You talked about the rage and the contact sport, and I would imagine that in fact was therapeutic, because that's a way of letting out, exerting force, just in response to feeling the emotions pent up, the feeling, just the swirl of trying to cope with all of this. And did you, so at that time when you became a young adult and you were just going through your 20s, did you feel like, could you sense that this was something you're still struggling with, or was it something that there was a disconnect, that maybe it wasn't something that you were insightfully aware of, that how you were handling?
I think it was a bit of both. I think there was definitely a disconnect. I almost kind of had to disassociate from myself from the age of 16 and below, which was the age that it happened. I felt like I kind of started again, but from a very dysfunctional place at the age of 17. But in reflection, there was lots of things that I was navigating through that I would say that I didn't even realize I was doing at the time. So for example, I might control situations so it didn't go down that particular road, or in terms of conversation, or if there was a conversation that ignited in the pub, maybe there's a scene on a new film that's come out, or maybe somebody knows somebody that claims they got raped, or maybe somebody else knows somebody that was accused of it, or whatever, something might come up in the topic. I would quickly exit myself from those conversations just to avoid being triggered, or just to avoid kind of how I might show up in those moments. But I became so accustomed to living in that particular way, I think I stopped realizing that I was doing it until I stopped doing it. It was almost like carrying a gradually heavier bag around on my back, and eventually it just got taken off, and I suddenly realized how I'd been living my life. So some of it was conscious, some of it was unconscious. But now it's so obvious to me now. I've gone through what I've gone through and got to the other end, that I think it was having a much bigger impact at the time than I care to admit.
So in the calm bag, it has GABA, theanine, and taurine. So theanine, which is B1, which is also in our B complex, but it also helps with the stress response levels. It also helps with the neurological transmitters in our brain. Combined with the GABA, and then you add taurine to it. Taurine is a non-essential amino acid in our body, but it's found in our heart, our brain, and our eyes. So in my personal opinion, it's very essential in our lives. But taurine has a calming effect as well. When I was battling all my AFib issues, I was taking high doses of taurine because that would help with my AFib. It would help with the palpitations I was having. And it also helped with the anxiety of having the palpitations because I knew what was going on, and so taurine helps a lot with that as well. So those three together create such a wonderful concoction that just really just calms people down.
Introducing Launchpad, the perfect partner to help you launch your dream project to the world. We know that time is of the essence, and we're here to help you make the most of it. With Launchpad, you'll get access to the most advanced digital tools and strategies to take your idea from a mere concept to a fully fledged success. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or a seasoned pro, we have everything you need to make your mark in the world. Launchpad, your ultimate launch partner.
We are spending quality time with our guest today, Angie McQuillin. We're talking about the courage to speak up. And Angie, the one thing that really struck me is that in your 20s, as you're starting to evolve, different things are happening. You're becoming more active. You are, just the circle of people that you're around, just growing your career, that sort of thing. What were some of the signs within you that started to surface that sooner or later this was not going to be contained any longer?
Yeah. I think one of the key things really is the, without realizing it, how can I describe this? So when you're very active, and I was very good at doing things. So I'm very musical. I was on stage playing guitar. I played football, as you call it, soccer in America. But I was doing all these things that would normally only be done by people that would be deemed confident. So it never crossed my mind that I wasn't particularly confident in my 20s because I was achieving things that I was doing. But on a deeper level, in reflection, my self-worth and my self-esteem had been shattered by what had happened. So despite the fact that I was seemingly doing really well on paper, my career was beginning to grow, I was doing lots of sporting achievements, I was getting captain of the team or whatever it might be, I still found myself reacting horribly in different situations. I was a huge people pleaser. I was very, very conflict avoidant. I was very passive. I put on a good front in my 20s, but a lot of it was more of an act of, I was confident doing things, but I wasn't confident in myself. And I think I just kept finding myself in situations where you would only do those things if you lack self-esteem. So a whole trail of terrible relationships before I hit my 30s. And like really toxic, really abusive. I had friends that weren't particularly like great friends, should we say, and I was just accepting things that there's absolutely not a cat in hell's chance that I would accept now. So that was the thing that really started becoming apparent to me, that I needed to start taking action on whatever it was that was driving this. I didn't even know at the time what it was that was driving it. I just knew that on a day-to-day level, I was reacting in a way that I didn't like the way I was reacting. I'd be easily triggered, or I'd be very easily scared of somebody, or I was easily intimidated, or I'd be very easily manipulated, and those types of things. And I wasn't speaking up as much for myself as I wanted to because I was scared of what people might think of me, or scared of their reaction. So they were the day-to-day things that I noticed the most, which set me on my path of recovery. And you just kind of keep digging until you find the thing that's really driving it. And I had to be honest, it was everything that happened in my teens.
Was there anyone in your close circle that mentioned, like, hey, Angie, what's happening? What's going on? Did anybody lean in and ask and just check in with you? Was it something that was picked up by others? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of friends that I've grown up with, in particular, a family, their sister and brother. The boy is my best friend, and his sister's a very close friend. And they knew the story because they knew this guy when I had an underage relationship with him anyway. So I've known them since I was literally 11 or 12. And they were the people that I spoke to frequently about it. After 20, I spoke to my sister about it. But in all honesty, outside that, I didn't speak to anybody about it. I just used to suppress it and keep it hidden from the world. And that was why I found my 20s and 30s quite a difficult period, because it felt like such a double life. Like I was on paper achieving well, and I had good friends and had nice people around me. They weren't bad people always, but I just kept finding myself reacting badly to different situations, or I was working too hard at work, or I drink too much at the weekends, or whatever it was, this thing that wasn't wasn't living a healthy life, should we say. So I didn't really have that many people tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "Are you okay? You don't see yourself," because I put on such a good front, and I put on and to be honest, it was so deeply suppressed. It wasn't just a front per se. I'd just become, that part of me had just become dormant and numb. And then every now and again, I'd have these meltdowns that I just then live through for a couple of hours, and then I'd just suppress it back down again. So a lot of it was unconscious, if I'm honest, and it wasn't until it almost involuntarily started surfacing to a level that I couldn't ignore it. That was when I really started taking heed of what was happening and what I needed to do about it, and that was later on in my 30s.
So take us to that moment where you couldn't contain it anymore, that it was just inevitable. You had to address things and just acknowledge the pain that you went through. What was that moment like?
Sure. I mean, it was probably over the course of about a year. It wasn't just one day I woke up and went, right, I'm going to do it. Well, it kind of was, but it wasn't like I went from no way to I'm going to. There was lots of trigger points throughout that year of little things that I blocked in my head. I was using as blockers anyway. And then the universe started moving those out of my way for me, so I had no more excuses. But I do remember the day before, I'd been to the pub, and ironically a conversation had come up around this topic about something else and somebody else. And I was once again faced with typical misconceptions of society, where these people were talking and they were, saying things like, well, yeah, but what was she wearing? And like, how much had she had to drink? And I reckon she led him on, and all these things, which is the classic reaction to the blame is normally focused initially on the survivor rather than the person that's done the violation. And I just couldn't contain it. I was like, I just need to go. So I left quite early, about 9:30. And then by 10 o'clock I was home, and I did not sleep that night. And it was then, it's like, right, whichever way the cookie crumbles, nothing can be harder than suppressing this. Now it's surfacing all the time, and I'm having to deal with this constant outbursts. So it was the following morning, round about 9 or 10 o'clock, that I called the police, and everything started there onwards. But that evening before, I literally hadn't slept at all that night, and I'd done a lot of crying, and a lot of anger had come out, and I was like, I can't live like this. I have to report it. And it was a very conscious decision to think to myself, if I don't do this, I'm actively choosing to spend the rest of my life in a very depressed way, or very upset way, with probably very deep depression, as opposed to dealing with it and just seeing what happens. And that was the choice I made, and hence why I called the police when I did.
What was their reaction when you made the report? How was that received?
Well, the police or myself, I mean?
The police.
It was 101 number. I don't know if you're familiar. It's like 911, but not the emergency number in England. The lady on the phone was brilliant. I've got to give it to her. She was very responsive. Had she have been a cold-hearted person who didn't really care, I think it would have been very different for me to do that. So I've got to give her a due. Like, I don't know who she was to this day, but I think it made me realise the importance of technically the first line of response, and the empathy that I got from that lady and her sensitivity around these questions, because it wasn't like I expected. I thought I'd just phone up, they'd say book in for a call with the local police, and I go down to the station. But I was on the phone in total over 30 minutes, and she had to ask me some really graphic, intimate questions, using body parts that I wasn't expecting to be talking about on the phone in that moment. So the way she handled it was excellent. And the police officer that stayed with me for the whole 6 years in that justice system journey was also excellent. I'm one of the few people that can't complain around the treatment from the police in such a story.
So you filed the report, and obviously you got the support that you needed on that first responders, first initial response. Take us through what the journey was like moving forward and seeking justice.
Sure. So you have the phone call, and there's lots of steps to it. I'll try and summarise it. It'd be quite boring, but you effectively get given to a police officer. You then have what's called an ABE, which is a video interview, effectively, and that is the interview that will be then used in court if it gets as far as court. Then there's an investigation launched, and the police have to decide if it's enough to continue with the investigation or if they drop the case. Thankfully, they did the investigation and they found that there was enough to continue with it. Then the person is approached and they are either arrested or invited in for an interview. He was coming across from another country, so an arrest was an essential thing. Otherwise, he'd flee the country and we couldn't do anything. We had to do this whilst he was on UK soil. He was then arrested and interviewed, and then with a number of different interviews and like all leads that are chased and everything else, 2 files are sent to the CPS, which is the justice system basically. And then they make a decision once more, having read both files, if they're going to prosecute and if they're going to go forward and charge this person. If they accept the case, that's the green light that you are going to give evidence under oath. And if you win in that trial, then he will be sentenced to prison. So there's lots of milestones within that journey. And that was a huge milestone when the CPS took on my case.
When they did, obviously they gave the green light to move forward. And can you talk about the setbacks that you experienced going through this to seek justice?
Wow, yeah, first of all, the time that it takes, right? So from the point that I reported it all the way through to the day that he was sentenced was 6 years. One of the hardest parts, I would say, and I've had this confirmed by many of the survivors that I've spoken to in the system, is the length of time that it takes. And just as you get close to actually going to court, at the last minute, and I mean literally the last minute, they will strip it away from you sometimes. And it's very, very common that they do that. So I had 3 rearranged court dates, but the journey to build up to knowing that you're going on court is immense. Like the anxiety, the pressure, and then you get a phone call at 3 o'clock on the Friday when you're due there on the Monday, which sounds like a big deal. So it doesn't sound like that big a deal, but it is because of the nature of it. But you've also got hotels booked, you've got friends coming, they've got time off work, you've got your dog booked into dog sitters, you've got, you're having sleepless nights, and then all of a sudden it's all gone and you have to wait another few months. And then you have to go through that all again, and then the last minute it's knocked on again, and this carries on. And it's almost like it's not physically violating, but it almost feels like a simulation of what the violation feels like, because there's such an enormous amount of helplessness that you feel. There is total lack of empathy in my experience. The police were brilliant. I can't say a bad word against the lady that I work with, but in terms of the CPS, you are literally bumbled along in this process and you feel like a lump of evidence. You don't feel like a human being that's being treated as somebody that's being violated. At the point when they take it on, it's technically their case, and it's them prosecuting, it's them charging and then prosecuting this person, not you. And you are just literally there to support this process as opposed to be somebody that's actually experienced the thing in the first place.
Welcome to Renew Laser and Skincare, where beauty meets technology. From laser hair removal and anti-aging treatments to facial sculpting, acne care, and injectables, our expert team helps you look and feel your best with customized, results-driven care. Located in Littleton, Colorado, we offer a comfortable, welcoming space and cutting-edge treatments tailored just for you. Visit renewlaserandskincare.com to book your transformation today. Renew Laser and Skincare, where confidence begins.
Adriana here. Welcome to Fit Bites. You've heard you are what you eat, but what you eat also affects your hormones, and it all starts in your gut. Now, your gut microbiome plays a direct role in metabolizing estrogen, producing serotonin, regulating cortisol, and even influencing testosterone levels. If your gut is inflamed or unbalanced, your hormones will follow suit. Symptoms like bloating, constipation, brain fog, irregular cycles, fatigue, and poor recovery, they are often traced back to gut dysfunction. Support your gut by eating more fiber, fermented foods, and nutrient-rich whole foods. Cut back on ultra-processed meals and seed oils. And if you've been on antibiotics or are under chronic stress, consider getting your gut tested and rebalanced. Healthy hormones do start with a healthy gut, so take care of it, and everything else starts to align. Stay tuned for more Fit Bites with Adriana. today we're talking about the courage to speak up. And Angie, before the break, I know you were talking about the points along the way of this journey and how grueling this can be. So take us through as CPS is taking on the case and the amount of time that it's going through it that is being put towards the case. And did you feel like did you get the impression that you were going to win, that justice was going to be served? Like, what was that like as you were getting to the point where perpetrator was being sentenced?
Yeah, I think my confidence did grow throughout the process, just generally, because I'd learned to speak up. And finally, this dark secret was now out in the open, and my family knew, because that was another big thing as well. But in terms of the actual journey itself, I think one of the most difficult parts was people not knowing about it and having to navigate through a normal life. I was quite visible on social media. So, for example, I had 53,000 followers on LinkedIn, and meanwhile I'm dealing with this behind the scenes. And I think I've gone off track on your question. I'm sorry, can you repeat it again? That's right. Sure. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot about that. Okay. Yeah. So going through the journey, my confidence definitely grew. One of the things that I lost a little bit of confidence and then kind of regained it to get some more control. So for a context, eventually we ended up in Crown Court in April 2025. I was very nervous going into that, but I still believed I had a good case because the police had reassured me I had enough evidence to create to prove the story that I was sharing. But I went into Crown Court the first time and ended up with a hung jury because there was lots of things that went wrong regarding this particular trial, and my evidence wasn't shown. My witnesses weren't interviewed on the things that they were interviewed by with the police. I wasn't even examined when I went on stand by my own barrister for any detail at all besides superficial questions like my age and my date of birth and yada yada. So when I came out of that particular court case with a hung jury, he'd had 2 hours on stand and I'd had around about 15 minutes. And the whole thing was there's a whole chain of things that happened in that court case. And although it increased my confidence from a sense of now I've got some idea of what I can do to regain some control because I'm going to have to go back into court and do it all over again, it was also quite anxiety inducing too, because to get a hung jury, you only need to convince, or not even convinced, but he only needed to get 3 people to not be convinced 100% that he did it, and then they would create a second hung jury, and you would not get a third chance to go up on stand again. So it's a lot harder than what people realise, I think, because it isn't just about who the jury believe. There is such tight regulations in order to get somebody sentenced. My biggest anxiety was that if I got a second hung jury, given the experience that I'd had in court on the first trial. As it happened, when I went into court on the second trial, it was handled completely differently. There was behaviour that was stopped by the judge that was allowed in the first one. There was my barrister knew the details, so this guy couldn't get away with lying on stand. And it was just a completely different experience. So I think the biggest thing that kind of gave me the wobbles, should I say, was the fact that I could get a second hung jury, because I hadn't even heard of a hung jury beforehand. In terms of the 6 years before, I don't think I necessarily felt confident or unconfident. I went in, I had to detach from the outcome. And that was a very distinctive thing that I remember consciously thinking about. And it stopped being about winning or not winning. And it started being about doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Even if that means that I go up on stand and he gets not guilty, I can't then ever think that I haven't tried hard. I mean, my biggest fear was to go to my grave and say I didn't even try. I didn't even try, and this man walked away scot-free without even trying to force him to be accountable. I never believed for a split second that I'd ever get as far as I did when I first went to the police, but persevering with it and detaching from the outcome and making the focus on doing the right thing for me was what helped sustain my time in that 6 years and helped me weather through 2 court cases in Crown Court as well.
So the final verdict, can you share with us what the verdict was?
He got guilty and he got found guilty. He got found guilty unanimously by all 12 within an hour, which is almost unheard of for an offence that was nearly 30 years ago. bearing in mind 6 months before we'd had a hung jury where after 2 days of deliberation, the jury couldn't decide, and he was sentenced to 6 years and he wasn't allowed any parole for at least 4.
And the going through the public, just in the public eye, and obviously in the UK, I would imagine that there was a level of scrutiny that came your way, or judgment, criticism. What was that like, and how did you handle it during that time?
I think I'd prepared myself for it before I received it. I didn't come out of court with a guilty verdict and go straight to market. I waited months, probably about 4 or 5 months, before I actually spoke out about it. And part of that was I was expecting people to be lacking in understanding of how it works. I had comments, for example, saying, how do you prove somebody's guilty after 30 years? It's too easy, whereas it is one of the hardest things to send somebody down for such an offence. I had people saying, you're only sharing this for attention. And the irony of it is that there's an expectation that if you're violated, you don't tell anybody. And then once you've actually done something about it, the expectation returns that you will return to silence again, where you've had your piece, you've won the court, now go and be quiet like a good little girl and get on with your life. Whereas actually, from coming forward, I've also had a lot of positive responses as well. And a lot of those people are also survivors, and I've seen the impact of me speaking to them and sharing my story with them and how much it has benefited them. So the majority of people haven't been violated. So not everybody's going to resonate with my story, but the people that have, I know it's going to have a big impact. And that is a huge motivation for me, regardless of the trolling that I get. Even if I get 10 people telling me I'm, I don't know, attention seeking or doing this for the wrong motivations, the people that I'm helping in the process keeps me alive. Well, not keeps me alive literally, but makes me feel alive and makes me feel like I'm doing a good thing.
How did your perception of yourself and who you are, how did that evolve over the years, and then through the verdict, and then post verdict?
I think I became a lot more indifferent to what people thought of me. After weathering 6 years of the justice system, it isn't just sitting in a system and waiting. Like, you're dealing with some of your darkest traumas that are now surfacing, of childhood healing that you haven't properly dealt with from 30 years ago. And you're dealing with a lot of other things. But I think once you've weathered something as traumatic as that, and with the imbalance of the system as well, there were so many things that he was allowed that I wasn't allowed. He was allowed access to my file. I wasn't allowed access to his file. He was allowed access to his barrister. I wasn't allowed access to my barrister. There was so much information that the biasness towards him. And then having to just deal with that and process it and do your own self-development on it, I think you just become a bit more bulletproof. And things that used to be important to me stopped really being that important to me. So things that used to really destabilize me, I'm now looking at and think, well, that's a puppy. Like, there's really nothing. So I became a lot more robust to people's criticism just from living through what I've lived through. I just don't get affected by the things that maybe would have upset me 7 years ago. Now I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Like, I don't mean to sound so indifferent to everything, but it has definitely strengthened me up and made me just less caring about things that previously I would have cared about.
You know, one of the things that we talk about on the show is a level of stress management, because sometimes when we don't manage stress well, it can really be taxing on the body. So when you look back at your life and just going through and navigating through this process, what does your stress management look like today in regulating stress versus back then?
Yeah, it's actually very similar, to be honest. Like, my stress management is always, my go-tos are speak to somebody. So I know that I have to use my voice to heal. That's something that I can't block up in terms of what's going on inside me. Exercise is massive, and being in nature. So as long as I've got those 3 things, it's only a matter of time where I will reach that place of healing of whatever it is that I'm going through in that period. I don't expect everything just to be like this, but they're always my go-tos. It's exercise, speaking, and nature.
How do you use your voice today, moving forward? Like, what are some of your favorite ways to use your voice?
Well, as I was an executive coach for like the last 10 years, my niche and my focus was actually on helping people become more assertive. So although all my clients were leaders and C-suite people and directors, everybody that I worked with was effectively there so they could be more communicative under scrutiny. So I had first of all, quite a bit of experience of knowing what it's like to speak under scrutiny. But secondly, I had the experience of knowing what it's like to just start speaking out generally. And I think that's one of the key parts that I've taken away from all of this is every time I use my voice on an occasion when I thought I can't use it, they're going to laugh at me, or they're going to think I'm stupid, or they're not going to think I'm saying the right thing. I've always taken that leap of faith in myself, and the more I've realised that you don't fall necessarily flat on your face every time, it becomes easier and easier to do it. So that's the journey of using my voice has been absolutely huge, hence why it became, at the end, easier to do when it came to going to the police.
Are you pouring your heart and soul into your business, but nobody seems to notice? Are you struggling to get your offer, your expertise, your program seen by the right people? Well, you're not alone. At Lunar Marketer, we believe every business deserves to shine. That's why we specialize in boosting your visibility with a powerful mix of strategies that actually work, without the complicated systems or outdated outreach. Scan the QR code now to schedule your free consultation or email us to learn more.
We're talking about the courage to speak up today. And Angie, one thing I wanted to talk to you about is the things that are harmful and then the things that are helpful for those who are a survivor for something as life-changing as what you've gone through. So can you talk about some things that do not work, that do not help when someone's navigating through this?
Sure. Well, one example I'm going to give you answers both questions there. So one of the key things that I got used to is because I'm like a historic survivor. So this happened when I was 16. I went to the police when I was 39 and now I'm 46. So there was a 6-year journey within that. And every time anybody found out that I'd gone to the police at age 39, almost every single person on this planet said to me, why did it take you so long to go to the police? Like, why now? And when you ask that question, it kind of implies that the survivor's on the back foot. It's like, justify it to me, prove it to me, like there's something wrong, that you've done something wrong here, you should have done it a different way. That's kind of how most people feel. But there was one occasion that I remember quite vividly with a friend of mine, we were just in the pub together having a drink, and he said to me, remind me again of when you were violated. And I said I was 16. Remind me again when you went to the police. I said I was 39. And I thought, here we go, like, why did it take so long? And instead of asking me why it took me so long, he said, how did you cope for so long by not going to the police? And it completely flipped it on its head. And I was so unexpecting of that question at that moment. I almost broke down in tears on the spot, because it was the first time somebody had asked me a question that was so validating. It was the first time I felt so understood that actually it's the hardest thing to contain this experience that you've had. It wasn't like you just woke up one day and went, oh yeah, I'll go to the police because I forgot to do it 23 years ago. It's actually really significant, and it's pained you for decades. And for somebody just to recognise that in a simple sentence of recognising it must have been hard, and there was no judgment attached to, and why didn't you? It was, and how did you cope from not going to the police? It's like he understood this particular instance. So I think when it comes to the way that we communicate with each other, particularly if you're speaking to a historic survivor, or even when I say historic, mine's quite an extreme case, but even if it's 3 years, 4 years or whatever, to be very sensitive to what that person is actually secretly dealing with, that most people don't see because they only see the outside, and we judge each other on what we see, not what we feel. So those questions, I think, have quite a harmful impact, because it immediately plants a little bit of shame on the person, like you've done something wrong and you now have to justify it to me.
What are some best practices for friends and family of survivors who maybe have just disclosed that they've gone through, that they've had the courage to say something? What are the best ways? What are some things that family and friends and loved ones can say that would be supportive of them?
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably easier to say what not to say rather than what to say, because showing love with your family shouldn't really be that difficult. And my family were great, to be fair. But questions like, what were you doing there? Why did you go there in the first place? Why were you with him in the first place? What were you wearing? Were you drunk? Those types of common day-to-day questions that for some reason most survivors receive off society, avoid them like the plague, because it immediately attaches the shame and like the pointing the blame, that's what I'm looking for, pointing the blame at the person that it's happened to. You know, there's just quickly to give an illustration of that, there's a story around a 15 and a 13-year-old that were violated. The 13-year-old girl and a 15-year-old boyfriend, and he ran away when a group of lads started beating him up. Then they violated the girl. Now, most people in the comments online when I was reading this were saying, well, what was she doing in the park at that time? It was midnight. You know, what were they doing there anyway? That's a fair enough question, but it shouldn't be our first question. Our first question should be, what is a group of guys in their early 20s doing raping a 13-year-old girl? But we for some reason, we don't think of it like that straight away. So for me, I think in terms of helping other people that have been through something similar, be very, very mindful of the questions that be mindful of the questions that may be associated with blame, and ask them how they're doing, ask them how it feels, ask them what the circumstances were at the time that stopped them from feeling safe to come forward. Ask them what would make a difference to them now. Ask them where they are and meet them at their place, because it is a journey and everybody will be at different places, rather than jumping in with the common day-to-day questions that actually do more damage than good.
I know that now you are speaking more about this. You are advocating just what it means to have the courage to speak up. And what's it been like for you to speak on this topic? And what kind of feedback have you gotten from women in particular about what it means to come forward like this? Yeah,
I've had a lot of support. I mean, I have had a little bit of trolling, but really in comparison to the support I've received, it's minimal. The women have, almost every woman that I know either has gone through something similar or knows somebody that has gone through something similar. So it's actually a really common thing. I've actually been I know you asked about women, but I just have to drop it in. I've been quite alarmed at how many men have actually said me too as well. And I think with a man that's been violated, not only do they deal with the trauma, but they deal with the emasculation on top of it too. So I think it's even harder in society for men to come forward to a degree. But since I've come forward, 5 people have actually been inspired enough to go forward to the police and report their assaults, which some of them were many years ago. And the people that haven't actually been violated, they're sending my content to their friends that have been violated. But the ones that I get most, that I feel for the most, are the ones that have been through something similar. And I can almost sense the anger that I used to carry. I'm not saying that's their fault. There's no fault in this. But I remember I was carrying a lot of anger before I actually dealt with it properly. And when I speak to women in the justice system, or speak to women that won't go into the justice system because it's so brutal, you know, I can almost sense this side of the frustration that person got away with whatever that they did, but they just don't want to be humiliated in the way that they might face in court. So people are very encouraging. Some are inspired by it, and some just kind of pat me on the back and then say, good for you, but I don't think I can do it. And then that's the end of it. So there's a real mix, but it's generally very positive.
And globally speaking, unfortunately, this is something that affects all areas of society, that there's so many survivors out there. Can you share a little bit, and we're going to pull up your info, can you share how viewers and even listeners can connect with you, on where to find you on social media?
Sure. So my most my most active social media is LinkedIn. That's where I've been most heavily, although I've taken a little bit of a rest from it for the last couple of weeks. And YouTube, what I didn't want to do is have a life where I was having everything all in one. So I'm still quite sporty, I'm still quite musical, and by the way, I'm a rape survivor. I didn't want to just become all these different titles kind of thing. Title's the wrong word. So I've just dedicated an entire channel on YouTube to my experience of being a silent survivor, and the content on there talks about how it feels to not report it and living with that as a suppressed thing, how it feels for the family to be told that this happened, how it feels to go into court and report it, what to expect in court. I've detailed what my first trial looked like and my hung jury. I've detailed what it was like on stand in my second trial, like the exact questions that I got as much as I could remember. So it's like a library of resource for the people that have maybe been through something similar. Even if they're not going to the police, they might feel quite validated by the 23 years that I talk about before going to the police. And if they are somebody in the justice system, they might get some takeaways that will be really useful for them whilst going through that as well. So I've dedicated the entire channel called Unsilenced Survivor, and I talk about everything. I'm just offloading onto this channel.
And what's the one takeaway you want our audience to have from our conversation?
I think that the main takeaway for me is it absolutely changed my life by being open about it. And I think one of the reasons why we don't talk about it is because we carry shame about it, and it's not our shame to carry. And if we didn't feel shame about it, we'd feel more open to talk about it. So actually facing that shame, which is inevitable, almost I haven't heard of anybody that's been violated and not had that experience. But speaking about it for some people might be telling a therapist, for somebody else it might be telling the best friend, for somebody else it might be the partner, and somebody else it might be going to the police. There's no rule book of who to tell, but I think one of the most difficult and most erosive things you can do to your own psyche and your own emotions is to not tell anybody and just think you can just deal with it by suppressing it and keeping it a dark secret that nobody ever knows about. I think that's the worst thing anybody can do. So for the love of God, if you have been offended in any way or assaulted in any way, just talk to somebody, whoever that may be. Please talk to somebody.
Very powerful message. Angie McQuillin, justice system survivor and speaker. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
And we just want to give a quick shout out for our sponsors. We appreciate their support: Biomed Mobile IV, Dapper No Code, Launchpad, Renew Laser and Skin Care, and Synergize Fitness. And for our viewers, we are on the web. Our website is thehealthrevolutiontv.com. There you can sign up for our newsletter. You can even email us with any show episode ideas that you'd love for us to cover. And then in the corner of your screen, you will see our QR code. You can snatch that super quick. And then as always, you can count on us to be there for you on the Arion TV channel, on E360 TV, and all the major distribution handles every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. That is all the time that we have for today. Until next time, take care of yourselves. We will see you soon.